the search for NLP, standing up a quick LP for POC, and I promise that that will not be the end of our acronyms. Many more to come, so you can get your money's worth on that. All right, let's get going. So, quick intro to me. I'm an engineer because I'm a curious person who loves product. I love people and I love problem solving. Quick background, I don't have a CS degree or any traditional schooling in computer science. My undergrad was in interpersonal rhetoric. So I very much love language and talking and semantic meaning and really getting underneath words to their intentions and their meanings. My graduate studies was in human and computer interaction, HCI. So that maps onto this research portion of design and really hearing from the sociological, ethnographical studies related to users and how they interact within different contexts and spheres with computers or digital experiences. I did not intend to, but this kind of maps onto the caring about people portion of my person. I got into healthcare with my career and now have chosen to kind of double down on that. About 7 or 8 years ago, after a short stint on trying to help startups get started up with MVPs and whatnot, a little boutique design and development shop, I got lured away by one of our customers who was starting a healthcare startup called Curvo Labs. And they dealt with supply chain spend management. And so that means anything that a hospital purchases, they buy a lot of toilet paper, they buy very few MRI machines, and they buy a whole gamut of things in between. And so we took, everything from the fire hose, we were drinking from that. We're really focused on clinical spend, physician preference items. That is to say things like heart valve or breast implant or a rod that they would stick in your leg whenever you break it. Things that a physician would put in you during a surgery, because there's a high margin, there's a lot of opportunity there for savings and efficiencies. And so that's where I was first introduced to solar and to search as a means of solving problems. And I fell in love. At first it was to kind of declutter and to normalize the data, because we would have, like I said, lots of really messy stuff. As you're probably well aware, healthcare is decades behind the curve when it comes to toolings and IT solutions. And so there's just very, very bad management of the data. It is a crap show, to say the least, in terms of how data is logged and managed when it comes to purchases, the way invoices are cut and reconciled later on, and lots of human error, lots of skews. Start with 2 zeros and end with 4. Some of them have dashes, some of them have dots. Some companies, Boston Scientific, looking at you, has a catalog number and then a SKU that's different, and it's interchangeably used throughout different health systems. Mergers and acquisitions. DePuy Synthes is owned by Johnson & Johnson, which is also called J&J, which is also Johnson & Johnson, a family company. And so that's all just within a single healthcare provider, and then you expand that across the country, and it's just a mess. So solar was our way of getting some sort of data intuitions about what was going on and where the market was going, what the trends were, what the benchmarks were for pricing of a particular item. And then, after we realized the power that we were sitting on with search, started to expose that to users in different experiences. And so that was what I did for about 6 or 7 years at that company. Transitioned to Elastic the last couple of years there, managed by AWS, and had a good time during that transition. And then last year moved over to Kairos. Back in December. And Kairos abides by the saying, a better match means better care. And what we do is we help our customers, which are healthcare networks, provide better access to their providers, or to their consumers, to their providers. So you have diabetes, you need to go see somebody, you need to schedule an appointment. We help you with the search, match, and book part of your journey there. And so if a better match means better care for Kairos, then the Kairos Search and API team that I manage, we say that we exist to connect humans to relevant care by connecting them to the relevant data. So if you're having a problem, obviously there's a gradation of acuity and severity to what your health concern may be, but at whatever level it is affecting your quality of life. It's your health, right? And so matching you with somebody that can see you tomorrow, that's a right fit, versus somebody 2 weeks from now that ends up being a bad fit, and you waste your time, have to start the process all over. that has real import to your life, quality of life. So that's what we do at Kairos Search. A shameless plug is that I am hiring right now for an NLP and ML role. And so you'll see some of the ways this talk is really geared towards what we've been doing this past year since I've been there, in terms of getting our foundations laid for where we want to go as a company and as an organization, an engineering organization, maturing into this competency. All right, so the agenda today, we're going to discuss the problem, we're going to discuss the space, and then just going to run through a couple example options before leaving you with some resources and doing some Q&A if time permits. So I'd like to level set first the expectations. This is not a master class in what to do. This is not going to be code sharing and say, hey, here's how you solve all your problems with some cool fancy footwork with NLP. This is not solutioning, all right? My hope and my intention here is to stir your creativity. As an engineer or as an engineering manager, your job is to solve problems, not to produce code per se. And so that's the level that I'm going to be operating in, all right? It's first principles. I want to prod at some things and get some seeds sown that can grow over time, right? Get you minded in the right direction. Another way to put that, and this is the manager or the coach in me, is I want to help you know where to look, not what to see. I'm not going to be telling you what to see, all right? Your domain, your data, your stakeholders, your customers will define all that. All right, so let's start with the problem. User journeys, pretty simple, right? Obviously, this is an oversimplification. Nonetheless, we can level set here. A user shows up with a need. They input their interpretation of that need into your system. You spit back results, right? And we all know that the money is right there in the middle, the convergence of these three. That you got the intention of the user, you got the query of the user, which is oftentimes different, and you got your documents that they're trying to get to that are oftentimes different from those two other things. But when the three coalesce, now everybody's happy. You've done your job, the user's happy, everybody wins, right? This is information retrieval 101. We got a user over here, got information over here. How do we bridge that? Bad news, that's you and me. That's how we bridge it, all right? And that's a scary prospect. But the good news is that it's also up to you and me. We're the ones who can save the day here, right? We could be the ones to help them get from A to B. Of course, it's a little bit hairier than that. It's not just one block of information. There are thousands and millions and billions of documents of data out there, depending on your particular application and data set. But there's definitely not just an N of one. All right, so it's not just a chasm to cross. It's a chasm to cross and then a haystack to sort through to find that needle. And it gets a little hairier still because there's no perfect answer most of the time, at least. And even if there was, even if we can know with certainty that this is the best thing possible to hand off to the user, they still want something that we like to call recall, which is to say there's these gradations of rightness or appropriateness to the search results. And while it's really, really hard to know exactly what the perfect result is, it is thankfully easy to know when you have garbage results, right? There's a result set that doesn't pass the smell test. So that's the position that you and I find ourselves in day out. And so the space, how do we solve that problem? There's lots of ways. One is statistical relevance, and this is baseline TF over IDF or BM25, the default similarity scoring that is in Elastic. And how often does this term show up in a document? How often does it show up across the corpus of documents? Do some computation there and try to come up with a statistically relevant way of describing the importance or the rarity or the weight of a given term, all right? No surprises there. On the far end of the spectrum, or the opposite end of the spectrum, we have NLP, natural language processing, which is probably the three letters that got you to sign up for this webinar. And so, we take those tokens, the vocabulary, man, woman, boy, girl, prince, princess, queen, king, monarch, and we map them in zeros and ones into a vector space, right? These are word embeddings. And you could do some really cool stuff. We got glove, word to vec, bag of words, fast text, all these different libraries and plugins out there that can help you to do some neat stuff with this, where you can even do addition. And you've probably seen that example before of man plus physician equals doctor, and then man plus woman plus physician equals nurse. And we all know that that's not exactly right. right? So they go off the rails sometimes, which is why we need more contextual awareness for our embeddings, to make a word not just be the word, but to be the word within the given context, right? This is called polysemy. And so just like I can express myself as John, as an employee, as a romantic partner, as an engineer, as a manager, as a father, as a friend, as a son, all these different expressions of me as a person. And I am no different between the two, but I express myself a little bit differently in each of these roles. Words do a lot of the same things there. So there's this kind of ecological expression of a given word or token when we're talking technical here, right? So let's take the word to get, the verb to get. We'll go past tense. I got the invite to do this talk. I received it. I got anxious this past week as I realized I'm not fully ready yet. So I embodied or experienced anxiety. And at the end of this, I hope to say, hey, did you understand it? You say, I got it, which doesn't mean you understood it, right? So same verb, 3 different meanings, depending on the context, right? So that makes a huge difference when we're trying to figure out exactly what's going on within words. And we could thank little Elmo here for that, all right? So Elmo came out a few years ago and really changed the game with contextually aware embeddings. But he was to be outdone by his friend Bert, right? And if you Google Elmo versus Bert, you can see some of the screenshots of Google results before and after the transition. And it's really impressive how far Bert and his very, very strong unibrow took us, right? But Ernie was not to be outdone, and so he surpassed Bert. And then Big Bird, of course, the jolly giant there, had to beat Ernie. And this is the current state of NLP. We've just got the entire Sesame Street cast, all 50 some odd years of them showing up with NLP acronyms. And it's getting a bit out of hand, but we're having fun with it nonetheless. And, you know, thoughts and prayers for whatever engineers have to force the Snuffleupagus acronym to work. All right, but here's a reality check, all right? As much as your users likely love Sesame Street, they don't care. And this, like, if I could choose one thing for you to walk away from our little webinar session here today together with, is this: your users just don't give 2 Oscars how you do this. They don't care if you use Bert, they don't care if you use Ernie, they don't care if you don't use any of them. Doesn't matter. You can name it after a Power Ranger, after any other lovable children's characters, or you can even not use NLP. They don't give 2 hoots about it. What they want is for you to take their needs and give them the right information, solve that need. That's all. And, you know, as fancy, as state-of-the-art, as sophisticated, as world-class as some of these things may be, I think we all know exactly what it's like to be a user and have something fancy not work. You know, we have the she's who must not be named, Alexa and Siri. And you ask them to start a timer because you just put some burgers on the grill. You ask them to play your favorite playlist. You ask them to do something that otherwise seems really simple and you take for granted. And they completely fall flat on their face, and it's infuriating. And this is something that doesn't matter. This is start my 4-minute timer because the meat's on the grill. I just have to say it one more time and it's going to probably fix itself. But still, as a user, we come in with these expectations and we think, this is simple. Why aren't you solving my problem? And even though you and I may know and respect Apple and Amazon with their engineering chops, as much as we know how shiny and awesome the tech is behind it, we don't care in that moment because it didn't give us what we needed. So no matter what you're doing right now within your organization, within your career trajectory, trying to chase after this NLP thing, right? This North Star that so many people are chasing. My big, I guess, affirmation for you today is to not care so much about the how, but to care about the what. All right, so we'll go through this hopefully somewhat quickly. There's 3 approaches. Again, oversimplification, but hopefully gets us you know, to the bedrock truth here. First is that kind of TF over IDF, BM25 situation, and this is where you need to spray and pray. And I know this because this is how I learned solar early on. You know, you do all sorts of tuning and tweaking. You have 15 versions of a stem stop worded synonymized field for this one, you know, vendor name or whatever it is, to where you can check it 18 different ways and cross-pollinate the answers and come up with some sort of deduced accuracy, right? This is really, really crappy, poor man's machine learning, right? And the hope is that you make enough permutations to catch most people in most use cases, and then you just cross your fingers or stick your head in the sand for the rest of them. The reality is, not only are you leaving some users out in the cold, but this is not really a solution. This is a house of cards that as soon as you see stakeholder needs changing, query patterns changing, anything change, the data change, it's going to fall apart. And this is what happened with me at my first search solution. It was working amazingly, and we're high-fiving, slapping backs, and then we sign up a new customer, and they come in with new data that has new noise that we were not yet accounting for, and everything went sideways. And so, that's part of cutting my teeth in search, but I would advise you against going this route. It's not going to last, all right? It's not sustainable. On the far end of the spectrum, alternatively, is you can try to host Sesame Street and have every one of the characters show up. All right, you can spend a lot of time and resources trying to line up a great ML, AI, NLP candidate. You spend a lot of your organization's capital to secure that person so that they don't go to Google, but they come to your side of the fence. You can spend a lot of time trying to get the organization suddenly ready for their imminent arrival. Things like analytics, tracing of the queries, logging, all these different things so that they actually have what they need to get the job done once they show up. The hope is that you'll spend enough money to actually purchase a silver bullet in the form of a person that they'll save the day. The reality, though, is that there are no silver bullets. The reality is that having the right person is great, but if you don't have the right organization for them, if the organization hasn't reached a level of maturation yet to sustain them, well, they're going to be gone 6 months from now, 12 months from now, when they get bored, when they get frustrated, when they constantly are blocked because of your own lack of maturity amongst the organization or within the different competencies that should be supporting them. So the reality is that you're betting all your chips on red, and the house always wins. So you're going to be empty-handed at the end of the day. And the final approach that I am advocating for today is crawl, walk, run. All right, find areas of opportunity and exploit them, drain them, milk every bit of value out of them that you can, and do it in a creative way with whatever tools and people you have on hand. There's always a way to do it, right? There's lots of ways to skin the cat. The hope is that you solve actual use cases and real pain points for people, right? One at a time, incrementally, in an agile sort of manner, iterating your way there. And all the while you're learning deeper portions and nuances of the user's needs and their experience. And then the reality, the output of that, is that you really do solve problems. You're not just tinkering, you're not just R&Ding, you are solving, right? You, your team, and your organization have the chance, the requisite time to grow, to mature into this new competency, to attract the right people, to take your time in hiring them, and to lay the groundwork, strong groundwork, for them to arrive and really take you to that next level. But you can't leapfrog down the tracks. So another way to put this is follow the Pareto Principle. There's likely a very fat initial head to your distribution of needs within the querying side of things for your users, wherein you'll get outsized gains for otherwise minimal investment. So you put in your 20% and you're going to get 80% reward. That may be on ROI, that may be 80% of the problems go away, that could be that just 80% of the valuable problems are solved for. Whatever the case is, you'll get outsized gains, and that's really where you want to focus your efforts, all right, as you approach this creatively. So cheesy as it may be, hopefully this one sticks with you and is helpful. Eyes before AIs. And that is to say, yeah, roll up your sleeves and dig into the data. Look through your logs, look through your queries, see what people are searching for, see where they're abandoning your search and they're going to Amazon or Etsy or Google or wherever it is, whoever your competitor is. Again, it's harder to know when something works, but it's pretty easy usually to see when somebody bounces. So check out your logs, spend 1 to 2 days, maybe not even that, 2 to 4 hours potentially, depending on the depth and complexity of your data, and start to notice the patterns. Because if you can't see it clearly there in front of you in a CSV, you're probably not going to see clearly what specs need to be had, what acceptance criteria needs to be had for a given solution, because you haven't actually seen the problem firsthand. So start there, eyes before AIs. All right, and a couple more slides before we get to just some quick examples, and then wrap up with some Q&A. The heart of NLP. Again, this is a first principles discussion, right? NLP is ultimately not about processing natural language, because natural language processing is about understanding what's beneath the natural language that humans use. It's about understanding your users. It's about getting their intent. It's about knowing what version of got they mean whenever they say it. Is it A, B, C, D, however many there may be? Which one is it? So we can understand what they're really meaning. We can know what they're wanting, and then we can serve up the right stuff. So if that's the heart of NLP, then we could take this very simple query, and this is something that we see and experience in our day-to-day at Kairos. Pediatric cardiologist 46220. That's a zip code, right? And so now we're looking at query segmentation, right? In order to get some query understanding. You can see that there's this age group or age range pediatrics, a specialty or a practice focus, cardiology, location ID, zip code ID. And so you start to break apart these different components or pieces of a given query and try to understand what's going on. And, you know, in the most basic sense, this is what NLP is supposed to be doing for you. But again, if you just put your eyes on some logs, you'll start to see some patterns and can do this just as well and attack that very valuable head of your distribution. So we're just gonna go through a few examples. Again, this is not supposed to be mind-numbingly impressive. This is an example of how you can start to crawl, walk, and run your way to success here, all right? So at the risk of offending anybody and insulting your intelligence, I know you're all brilliant, smart engineers here, but sometimes we get too smart for our own good, right? And we try to over-engineer things. So remember the fundamentals. Get back to the basics. Maybe you need to remove norms. Maybe you need to scrub your data better before it gets ingested. Maybe you need to ignore some data. Maybe you need to pony up and do a little bit better with your analysis on the data. Maybe you can get some gains out of going to a term-centric query with the DISMAX query instead of, you know, the field-centric. Whatever it may be, there's a good chance that some of the fundamentals can be revisited by you or your team and can be improved. And if you're going to be building this big extra piece to your entire process, pipeline, and application, this heavy, sophisticated NLP, ML solution, you better make sure you have a good, strong foundation, right? That there aren't any cracks in the most basic places. So get your house in order. That's the first and most absolutely necessary step you've got to do, because at the end of the day, even if you don't end up doing this extension to your home, so to speak, this is still going to get value to your users in very basic ways. But again, that is what we're here for as you know, practitioners with users and with stakeholders and with businesses in mind, is that we're trying to deliver value. It's a great place to start. It's just to revisit your foundations and make sure that you plug any holes. Second, use every tool in the toolbox. It's not cheating to use your application layer or to borrow from other infrastructure to help make a better search experience. It doesn't have to all be, you know, all your eggs in the basket of Elastic. It just doesn't. All right, so pediatric cardiologist 46220. Well, it doesn't take much to use a regex and deduce or discern that that is a zip code, right? Before we ship off our query to Elastic. And maybe we don't want anybody else in any other zip code to show up. Okay, well, we change our query before we shoot it off, and now we have a filter on the zip code, right? That must be matched that criteria. So we want pediatric cardiologists, and you can get nice relevance out of that, but the filter is that they have to be in the zip code. Well, something we did recently was, okay, let's just drop a pin at that zip code after we discern that it's there and have a nice, you know, proximity range query going on there to where there is the concentric rings and distance from this central point that affects the relevance and the sorting of the providers that are brought back. Again, this is very simple. This is pretty trivial work for your engineers to do or for you to do. It's a trivial amount of impact to the infrastructure. You just restored this on Redis for a quick grab before we shoot off the lat long to Elastic. And it's a trivial amount of latency added to the entire flight of the request time, but it's a non-trivial impact to the user's overall experience. That now, instead of being served up, providers who are maybe across town because they are more relevant with those first two terms than the last one, we know we deduced in a sort of NLP-esque way what it was that the user was really after and accommodated that. Facets or features, right? And there's a lot that we could do here, and I was tempted to just roll with this in multiple ways instead of any of the other items, but I'm going to point you to somebody a lot better than me at the end of this for that purpose. Facets or features about your data, right? They are the facts about your data, the simple truths about what's going on in your data set, all right? This is why whenever your precision is not great and a user gets a bunch of results and they don't like the top few, guess what they're going to do? They're going to facet. They're going to use facets as the drill downs into features that they wish they had given you or that they wish that you had discerned from what they did give you. And I think that part bears repeating. The facets are the ways that users are going to tell you ultimately what features were in their request or that they wish they had put in their request. And so we can discern a lot by looking at the way people not only search, but then navigate after the fact. And we can start to see those pathways carved out of our data. All right. And if nothing else, this will be a great starting point for you to know exactly what to hand off to your NLP person whenever you hire them, to give them a good idea of the distribution of data and the depth of certain pieces of your data and what they can really see there and start to work with. The place I would point you for facet-related fascinating talks is a guy named Ted Sullivan. I think he's a senior solutions architect at LucidWorks. He's spoken every year at Activate that I can remember. He has some great blog posts. He's very verbose, very thorough, but has an awesome, deep baritone grandfatherly voice, like bring you over by the fireside chat and just school you on facets. And he's always talking about the way that you can unearth. I think he even has some talks about NLP specifically in relation to facets and how they are the gateway drug, so to speak, into getting into those use cases. So highly recommend that. I'll have him on a slide a little bit later, but Ted Sullivan. And so just a quick little visual of that these different pieces that we were doing in our query segmentation, you can start to see how the facets would play into ways that you can put your thumb on the scale during the pipelining process, during the query time process, or kind of post hoc. Some honorable mentions that, in the interest of time, didn't run down the path. Again, visual of the fat head here. Depending on your data source or your data and your domain, there are data sources out there that can serve as a source of truth. So Wikipedia would be a great one for a lot of cases. That is to say, maybe you're having problems giving really bad results because you're overstimming. You're overly aggressive in your stimming, right? And so heart attack maybe is stimming kind of weirdly and giving you other results. And the reason is because it's not a protected phrase. But you go to Wikipedia, heart attack is a phrase. There is a page or an article about it, whereas something like heart attackers or some other random variation is not. And so you can use something like Wikipedia or an alternative source of truth as a backstop to know that, oh, Harry Potter is a thing. Like that is an entity, right? So don't stem these two tokens separately, protect them. And so there's really creative ways that you can go out there and not have to recreate the entire data set, recreate the wheel. You can borrow from the giants that are out there, stand on their shoulders. Things like near me, similar to the 46220. It doesn't take an NLP expert to see near me in a query and say, oh, you know what? Maybe we should do a proximity search in relation to where this person's coming from. So there's probably in your data some measure of this sort of experience where something that people commonly put in to the queries and that you can, without any hesitation, without any doubts, know exactly what they mean. And it's okay, again, this is not cheating, this is your application. It's okay to pluck that out and to tune up the query accordingly. It doesn't have to all be in some magical black box process, right? And PMI, point-wise mutual information. It's a means of measuring association on information theory. So using the heart attack example again, you could run some quick analysis to see, okay, how often does heart and attack show up in my document separately versus heart attack show up as a conjoined phrase. So you can actually see how things break apart into tokens or phrases, which again could help you to know where you need to protect things with your queries, instead of breaking them apart, doing stemming, doing certain operations on them that otherwise you would not want to undertake because they totally wreck the meaning of what the user is asking. They're not asking for heart or attack, they're asking for heart attack. So final words here as we hit the 30-minute mark, right on time, is focus and have fun, all right? If you're not having fun, you probably shouldn't do it. You should find another field or another company, and again, Kairos is hiring and we have a lot of fun. But you should focus because it's not fun to have a lot of miniature failures, things that never see the light of day, things that never actually deliver value. But miniature wins, micro successes, those are lots of fun and they build a lot of momentum. And just like our friends at Sesame Street, they don't teach the alphabet every episode. They teach one letter at a time, one number at a time, and they do it in a fun way. And so as you try to tackle this NLP journey for you and your organization, highly, highly recommend that you go at it in a creative, orthogonal way and solve problems and learn while you're doing so instead of trying to boil the ocean. Here's the last slide with some resources. Ted Sullivan at LucidWorks. Giovanni Fernandez Kincaid is great. He spoke at Berlin Buzzwords a couple years ago. These conferences you can check out. Activate is actually coming up on Thursday. Spark NLP on Slack, Relevant Search. Great book, great Slack channel. And yeah, back to you, Faith. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, John. That was really awesome. Super interesting stuff. Do we have any questions from the audience? I want to give folks some time if they want to come off mute to ask or have anything they want to throw in the chat. I myself haven't had much exposure to NLP within my current role, so it's super informative, really interesting for me to hear about and learn about from you. Yeah, definitely something that I'm interested in learning more about as technology becomes ever more ingrained into our daily lives. So thank you so much, John. Super awesome to hear from you today. And if we don't have any other questions or comments, go ahead and wrap things up. Hope to see other folks in the future. And thanks for coming by. Bye, y'all.
Oh, got one.
Oh, we have one.
Yeah, I'll answer that question real quick.
Sure.
Actually, we use the faceting mechanism to get a quick cursory glimpse of which zip codes we had on hand that were part of just our general data set. So that's just part of our pipelining process now. I don't remember at this point if it's nightly or weekly, but we just do a pulse check on, hey, do we have new zip codes that we need to accommodate? We also are doing one that is for any that we don't know. That's a little bit separate process, but again, using those facets to know kind of a shorthand or shortcutted version of knowing what's in our data so that we can accommodate it accordingly. That's a good question.